Good morning. Welcome to Empowered with Gina podcast. I am proud to bring you today somebody who's been very friendly and inspirational to me on my journey, not only in the law field, but in the surrogacy journey. Today, please meet Miss Samantha Sedaka.
Oh,
Welcome, friend.
thank you.
How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure.
I always start asking my guests 3 adjectives to describe yourself.
Oh, my.
I know. It's always so fun.
Determined.
Yes.
Absolutely determined. Kind, I'd like to think. And unstoppable.
Oh,
Those are my 3.
And I can attest to that. So Samantha is here to discuss her surrogacy journey. But just some background, I have met Samantha through me being a lawyer and in the legal field. Samantha is a titan in the industry and not a lawyer, but an entrepreneur, business owner. Can you tell me a little bit about your business?
My company is Doctors on Liens, and we represent doctors that will work on a lien basis. And the clients that our doctors are seeking are law firms, personal injury, some workers' comp, but primarily personal injury.
And just some background, why and how did you start that company?
Oh,
because you know I love a girl boss.
Okay. My company is 31 years old. I was a child prodigy.
Totally.
But, what happened was I had worked for a medical group. It was called CBL Medical. And I was their senior marketing rep, even though I was like 24 years old or something, really 25. And when they were going out of business, a doctor called me, and he was the brother of one of my clients, one of my attorneys, and he said, "Oh, I heard you're closing, LA West Medical. What are you doing with all of your clients?" I had nothing planned. So right then and there I said, "Oh, I'm starting my own company and I'm taking them with me." And he said, "Well, I'd like to be one of your clients." I said, "Fantastic. I'm very busy this week, but next week I can meet with you and we can discuss it." And I hung up with him. I called a couple of my attorneys and I said, "I need a business attorney and I need to know what I have to do." And I just put together Doctors on Liens, and I went and I met with him. I signed him, and he just retired this year, but has been my client the entire run.
Really?
My entire run, he was my client. He was the first. He was my OG.
Wow.
And as time went on, the company evolved. It was a one sheet. I was a marketing rep with a one sheet. There was no Instagram. There was no internet.
You just
There was
learned
no
as you went,
website.
too.
There was nothing.
So you didn't have these grand aspirations to be a business owner, to have this business. It's just kind of
I always knew I was going to be a business owner. I also knew, I was a marketing rep, and while I was doing it, I knew I could do something with it. It just didn't occur to me. It's easy. I had a job and I was making great money, and I was young, and I wasn't married. I had no kids. I was making terrific money, and there was no need for me to branch out. But once the opportunity presented itself, I was like, wait a second, I can do something with this. And I came up with the whole concept. You can be one marketer and have, as long as no one's competing with each other, which has been my model the whole time, I can have a doctor in Burbank, I can have a doctor in West LA, I can have a doctor in Gardena, have the same marketing rep. They're not competing. And if anything, I can get people used to calling me for the referrals.
Interesting.
And then I can spread the love. I didn't expect it to, be the monster that it is today. I didn't expect to be in all of California and Nevada. I had no idea that it would grow the way it is, but I always knew I was going to own my own business. I didn't know in what form, but I knew.
Sure.
I didn't like working for people.
Right.
That's why I was a marketing. Yeah, that's why I was a marketing rep. Being a marketing rep is great. You work for someone, but you make your own hours. I could never report and stuff.
Yeah.
So
well, that's amazing.
that's how it came.
So, I applaud you for that, because running a business and maintaining it and having it scale over 31 years and continuing to scale is no small feat. And so I commend you for that.
Thank you.
While you're doing all that, you get married.
Yeah.
And you walk me through this.
Well, I started Doctors on Liens. I was dating my husband, and he had a second bedroom, and I actually started it from his bedroom, and he's never seen anything like that, which was hilarious. And then we got married, and of course, you get married and you want to have children. I was young. I got married, I think it was 28, 29, and it wasn't happening for me. It just was not happening. And we went through 10 in vitros,
Wow.
15 artificial inseminations. We did something I don't think they do anymore. It's called GIFT, where they cut into your fallopian tube and they drop the sperm
Oh.
to bypass everything. I mean, that was horrific. I
Oh.
hope they don't do that anymore because it was terrible. And nothing was working for me. And then I saw at the time, it wasn't like we had said earlier, there wasn't the Kardashians, there wasn't everyone talking about surrogacy, but there was Joan London on Good Morning America.
Sure.
She was one of the first. And I was like, oh, wait a second.
She was vocal about it?
She was vocal about it.
Okay.
She didn't say if it was her egg or not. That was
Okay.
the big thing. But she talked about gestational surrogacy. And then I was friendly. Camille Grammer was married to Kelsey Grammer at the time. And I have ulcerative colitis, and I think she has Crohn's or colitis. I don't remember. And someone connected us. And she had just had her first child through a gestational surrogate. So that was all I had gone on.
What year was this?
My girls were born in 2003. So this was 2001,
Wow.
2002, something
Sure.
like that. So it took me a while. I mean, with fertility, there's a line in the sand and you just kind of cross it. When I first started, I said, all right, well, I'll take pills and I'll do artificial insemination, but I'll never do shots. And I'll never do IVF. And then you go, all right, I'll take the shots, but I'll never do, and you're never do changes, as you go down the journey on what you want. And then I was like, all right, well, I'll do IVF. I'd gotten from all of this. I'll do IVF, but I would never do, you do a lot of, what you learn is you want to be a parent, and the journey. Another woman I got connected with who had just done, and her sister was her surrogate. She said something to me, and it just hit me right. And she said, there are all these people, and think of it as you meet some guy and you have this big fabulous wedding, and you walk down the aisle in the gown and the whole thing, and you marry him, and he's a total jerk, and you get divorced. The wedding doesn't mean anything. It's the marriage that means something. And the same thing, the pregnancy, think of it as the wedding. It doesn't mean anything. You want to be a parent. That's the most important thing. So however you get there, you get there. If you get there through adoption, if you get there through surrogacy, if you get there through IVF, it doesn't matter.
Right.
However you get there, you get there. That's the marriage. You'd much rather elope and have, a long marriage than have this fabulous marriage and get divorced, a month later.
Oh,
so when she said that clicked with me, and that gave me the courage to explore surrogacy.
Really?
But that was not easy because, this was 22, 23 years ago. It wasn't like now. I mean, God bless the Kardashians. I
No
mean,
kidding.
really and truly, they've normalized it because nobody was doing it. And we had to do a lot of research, and there was this woman named Myrna. She was doing it. And then I found the Center for Surrogate Parenting. And as luck would have it, it was the largest agency in the world at the time, and it was in Beverly Hills. And they shared an office with one of my attorneys. Jay Levitt was one of my attorneys, and he shared an office
One of your
space.
client.
Yeah, he was one of my clients. And he shared an office space with Center for Surrogate Parenting, and that's who we ended up using. And at the time, again, because of the Kardashians, there are a million women that want to be surrogates now, and it doesn't seem weird or anything.
No.
But at the time, nobody was willing, because they were saying, I'm not having someone else's baby and giving it away. And
Yes.
and people are saying, oh, and it's not your kid. It's like, it's my
I was going
genetics.
to ask you, what was some of the
Oh,
feedback you got?
horrible. I had some horrible. The surrogate had a horrible experience.
Oh,
She delivered my girls, and in the hospital, and she checked herself out the same day she delivered twins, by the way.
No.
Because the nurse was so nasty. The nurse said to her, I can't believe you're willing to give up your babies. And she said, they're not my babies. I was the oven. Like, they're genetically hers. They're not mine. I was doing, a wonderful, kind gesture. And the woman was like, well, that's just, and she said, my surrogate said to her, You're a nurse. You're in the medical profession. Do you not understand what you're talking about? It was crazy. So she was so upset. She checked out that same day. But nobody understood. And people said to me, oh, how can you do it? How can you trust her? And as someone who runs their own business, I am a control freak. I mean, anyone who works for me can tell you that. I oversee everything. And this was one of the biggest, most important thing. And I'm giving it. And she was a stranger. I mean, I met her through the gestational, through the agency. And I met her and we had to meet with psychologists and all of that. But I didn't really know her. And it was the beginning of the internet was just starting. And the big thing was American Idol.
Oh, yeah.
And she and I used to go back and forth. She was in Northern California. And she and I used to go back and forth on the computer over who we thought was going to win on Idol and things like that.
Yeah.
And she would say, oh, and we have a doctor's appointment. I fly in for the appointments and things like that. And even down to the delivery. She went into labor 6 weeks early. My girls were born 6 weeks early. Wow. And right before we were going into the delivery room, it was all so new. The doctors were like, I don't know if all of you can go in the room, meaning my husband and I and her husband. Wow. Like we were going to have to make a choice. And obviously I was going. Like I was like, I don't care what anyone else, I'm there. Yes. But ultimately they let us all in. But it was a real nail biter if we were all going to be allowed in. And we wanted him in there to support her husband in there to support her. But my husband wanted to be there with me and see the birth. And they were giving us a hard time because they didn't really understand surrogacy either. Sure. I mean, it was so crazy. It was such it was so new. We also had to have all the paperwork filled out ahead of time. So at the time, now it's seamless. I'm sure when you went through it, it was a completely different situation. So easy. It was not.
Cookie cutter.
We had to make sure ahead of time. We had attorneys and so many people involved, so that when we went into the delivery room, we were given the bracelets to match the girls.
Right.
And she wasn't given a bracelet. We were given a bracelet, and that our names would be on the birth certificate, because prior to that, you would have to adopt your own children.
Oh, really? I didn't know
we
that.
were right at the beginning. So we were able to have our names on the birth certificates and stuff, even though we were, and it had to be in California, because at the time, and I don't know what's changed because it's a long time, but people were doing surrogacy in California because they were recognizing the intent of the conception. I think that was the wording, something along the lines of that. And that was how they recognized who the parents were.
Got it. Okay.
And they were acknowledging that in the surrogate.
The intent of who.
Yeah. She was the oven.
Sure.
In no other term. So it was it was a very different journey.
Wow.
And people were nasty about it. And even my daughter was in 6th grade and they were doing sex education. No. And I have twins, and the one who is much more vocal, thankfully it happened to her because she gave her entire class a lesson.
Good girl.
And the teacher was doing sex ed and talking about, different ways of having children and so on and so forth. And I think she mentioned IVF and things like that. And then my daughter raises her hand and she said, well, you forgot about surrogacy. And the teacher didn't even know how to respond. And she said, what do you mean? And then Charlotte went through the whole story saying, how she was born through a gestational, and she knew the word.
6th grade.
6th grade. Oh. Well, she knew, my children knew their story. They met
I want to ask you about that too. But finish.
But she educated the whole class.
Wonderful.
And then a boy raises his hand and said, so you're adopted? And she said, I am absolutely not adopted. And there was another girl that was adopted. She goes, so you're like me? And she was like, no, I'm not like you at all. It's very different. She came home, she was very upset. We had to call the school and see if we could go in and speak to them, and they wouldn't let us.
Really?
Which was shocking because we were at a very progressive school, and they said it was too confusing, and we should just let it be. So that was very surprising.
Sure.
But
and so my question, and I'm not surprised because it wasn't
terrible.
normalized.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't
so
normalized.
Children will repeat the fear mindset that they see at home.
Yeah.
And the lack of education. How did you raise your children with surrogacy being part of their life?
Oh,
Or
that was a very big part. I was very clear right from the start. I had nothing to hide. It was not a shameful thing, and I was never going to make them surprised. It wasn't going to be anything like that. They knew right from the start. And we did this analogy with baking a cake. And our whole thing was, I told you this.
that's the one I use to explain to my daughters.
Yeah, it's the best analogy. So you want to make a cake, and you have your eggs, you have your milk, you have your sugar, your flour, you put everything together, and then you go and your oven's not working. And you're like, oh, what am I going to do? So you knock on your neighbor's door and you say, may I borrow your oven? I have this cake that I can't bake it. And you bake the cake. And that's exactly. So the baby, the mom and the dad are the egg and the flour and the sugar and the milk. And you make a cake, and the oven, the neighbor's oven is the surrogate helping you. And you stand there and you wait for the cake, and the cake comes out and you say, thank you so much. And it was never anyone's cake but your cake the whole time. And that was surrogacy. And luckily our surrogate, she had been a surrogate for someone else before us and had her absolutely horrific experience. And they really treated her like a servant. Like she gave them, and she wanted to at least, see how the baby was doing, and they didn't want to. I never had that problem. I was so grateful.
Same.
And to this day, we send her a Mother's Day card and we thank her. We send her a birthday card and we thank her.
Wonderful.
She sends my girls birthday cards every year. Like, it's a whole thing. She came to the kids' first birthday party, and she had offered to be a surrogate again. And I had said, I need another year because I had preemie twins that were a handful. And
your business.
And my business. And then, shockingly, after 7 years of fertility problems, I got pregnant with my son, naturally, and ended up having a baby. And she was one of the first. I called my parents, my husband's parents, and then I called the surrogate and I said, you're off the hook. You don't have
this
to.
one.
I got this. And she was, as thrilled as anyone else. So it was great.
I have to thank you for the cake analogy, because one of the fears I had when going into surrogacy was, how am I going to explain this to my children, my daughters, who were very young at that time? And that analogy that you shared with me is what I used. And it's just so commonsensical. Like,
yes.
young children and adults understand it. And what is the argument?
Right.
There's none.
Well, that's the thing that still kills me. That's why I responded. You had said about the Pope. I can't even believe. I'm still in shock. It's 2024, and this is still going on. It's so nonsense. And I still feel like, whose business is it? However you start a family, as long as you're a loving parent that wants to nurture a child, whether you adopt or you do a surrogate or however, IVF, whatever, who cares?
Well,
and
yeah.
whose business is it anyway?
The Catholic churches.
That's
which I don't agree with.
I know it's
nobody's business.
It's nobody's business.
Right.
It makes me so nuts. That was the thing. I couldn't even believe in this day and age that it's still happening.
It sure does. And again, what you were referencing, the Pope just a couple months ago issued a statement saying that children born out of surrogacy was deplorable, despicable. I forgot the word he used, and he likened it to sex trafficking and commoditization of the female body. And I'm not going to repeat what I said, but it's unfortunate and infuriating, because you have someone like that, a head of state, of religion, of culture, whatever, and you're still propagating this ridiculous, untrue, false narrative.
He should keep an eye on his priests is better.
I mean, he needs to go focus on your priests, what they're doing.
People in glass houses,
Don't get me started on
take
this.
care of your own side of the street before you start criticizing someone else's.
We should do a whole podcast on this topic. But I digress.
Yes. Go on.
So walk me through. Now, I know your daughters are both in college now. Talk to me. Did you ever at any point, because people ask me this, did you ever feel not connected to them? And I think I asked you this when we had coffee that one day.
The funniest part is, people ask me that all the time. And I wish my husband's book, I'll show you
We'll
the
definitely
opening.
post it too.
Yeah, I'll show you the opening story of it. With my girls, I was right there front and center. And I was so connected right from the start. I watched them be born. I went with them when they did the score. What's it, the APGAR, whatever it's called.
Oh yeah, APGAR.
APGAR score. I was there for the whole thing, And they both, they were 6 weeks early, so they had to go into the NICU and everything. And I was there with them. And then I had my son, who I gave birth to, and I had a C-section. They showed me the baby. They put him on my chest for a second. And then I had surgery, the C-section. And they took the baby and they wheeled me off into recovery. And I was like, where's my baby? Like my girls, I held them immediately.
Isn't that funny?
Right away. It was different because they were my first babies, and every first mom is nervous and crazy.
Yes.
So I was terrified, and they were preemies. They were 4 pounds and 5 pounds. Not even. One was 4 and one was 4.5. They were tiny, tiny. They were wearing Build-A-Bear. They had to wear Build-A-Bear bibs because they were so tiny. So I was afraid of them because they were so fragile.
Yes.
But I felt very connected. And they were mine. Like they came out, they were mine.
Your babies.
One looked exactly like me, and one looked exactly like my husband.
So beautiful.
It was. I think nature just does that.
Always,
It's a weird thing. But I felt totally connected to them. And my son, I felt connected to, but the birth experience with my girls through surrogacy, I was more present.
Correct.
I wasn't drugged. I wasn't on, it was a C-section. So I
Split
had
open.
Yeah, I had a whole, I was all messed up. So it was a very different, both times it was different experiences, but I don't feel any difference.
That's wonderful. I get that question a lot.
Yeah, the bonding difference, I don't. And I think if you ask someone who adopted a child and gave birth to a child, and people don't believe, but when you love a baby, you're changing a baby, you're vomited on in the middle of the night. That's yours. That's your baby.
And the way they look at you, they're that's all they know is you.
Yeah, and that's it. Like that's the whole thing. And for me with the surrogacy, when I started with surrogacy, it was very rare. It was so hard to get a surrogate. There were so few because people didn't know about it. So I was on HeartScent, was a list. It was a Chinese adoption agency. I was on that, and I was on the list for surrogacy, and whatever came my way, I wanted to be a mom. That's all I wanted. I wanted to be a mom. I didn't care how it happened. But it just so happened that's when SARS, and then they stopped all the adoptions, and then I was like throwing myself, and we got very lucky. We were picked within a month, which was unusual. People were waiting like 6 months, a year and a half to get a surrogate because there were so few surrogates at the time. We just got very lucky. We looked younger than we were.
Sure.
I think I was 30. I was 35 or 36 when I had the girls, but I had no children, so I looked really young.
Yeah.
And I had no,
Still do.
no, thank you. I had no, there was no loss of sleep. So
Sure.
I was a very young 36. I could probably go for about, 25 or 30 maybe at the most. So I think that helped. The surrogate wanted a young couple that didn't have children and everything, and we kind of fit the bill. So, and she was older than me, which was shocking. At the time when the surrogate agency said, "Oh, we have someone for you," and she was like 2 years older than me, and I said, "I don't want an old uterus. I thought I was getting. I want like a 20-year-old
fresh
or
spring
something."
Chicken.
And she said, "The only thing that matters is the age of the egg.
That's it.
The uterus." She's like, "Your mother could give birth to your baby. It doesn't matter."
How interesting.
Yeah. She said, the age of the uterus does not matter. It's the age of the egg. She's like, the one you're considered a generic pregnancy. Anything over 35.
They use that word with me too, with my
geriatric,
two girls.
yeah,
Geriatric.
geriatric. Oh my God. I was
said,
so insulted.
First of all, how rude of you. Second of all, let's use another word.
Yeah, it was so
I am
insulting.
over 30. Like, what are you talking about, geriatric?
Yeah.
And they still use that word.
Geriatric pregnancy. Well,
rude.
they said.
It's not necessary.
Yeah. Well, but I have to say, I have my girls
that.
are 21, and I'm very, very clear with them. One thing that doesn't change, like we have come so far, as women, we work and, we're vice presidents of the United States. Everything's so great. Biologically, there's something that we're feeding a false narrative because all these celebrities are having children in their 40s and their 50s, and it's not easy. When you hit 35, you fall off a cliff fertility-wise, and your egg production and the quality of your eggs and everything. So make no mistake that even though we do have the technology, it's not a walk in the park.
Right.
and there are more complications in terms
Yes.
of the
More
baby.
risks.
There's so many risks. So I've already said to my girls, they're graduating next year, I said, if you would like to freeze your eggs,
So smart.
I am more than happy to go down that journey with you. It's their choice. I'm not
So
forcing
smart.
them, but
They have the
as an
option.
insurance policy so that they can live their life. And if at 40 they want to first have their kid, they don't have to worry,
About old eggs.
if there's old eggs, old expired eggs.
Which, for the record, I harvested or retrieved my eggs when I was 41. So I had some old eggs and they worked.
And they worked,
My
and they were
boys are
perfect.
fine.
Yeah, no, but
But the risks do
but
go
the
up
risks
with
go up.
anything.
So that's I have a couple of messaging. One is and it's a lot of work, which brings me to my charity is Baby
Yes.
Quest, and it's expensive and it's horrific. That's the one thing that I think is so unfair. Having a child and having your family, it should not be a privilege for the rich. It should be everyone's right. Everyone's
Yes.
right. And it's not, because you did surrogacy. That is not cheap.
It's not cheap.
That is not cheap. My first house was very tiny, and all of my money went to surrogacy, and all of my money went to IVF. Just IVF alone is stupid expensive, and insurance doesn't cover anything. They don't cover. They
Right.
cover nothing. Not even the medication is ridiculous. So it's a horrible situation.
So tell me about the foundation.
So Baby Quest, what we do at Baby Quest is we offer grants. They are not loans. We give money to couples that would like to have children and can't. So it's a variety. A lot of times I like to say it's like a fireman and a teacher. This couple can totally raise a baby. They have the financial funds to raise a baby. It's not like they're going to have any real hardships. But IVF will put them over the top,
Right.
and they cannot afford IVF, or definitely not surrogacy on those kinds of salaries. So they will grant the money. And you write to our organization, and we get a ridiculous amount of people requesting. And we do not care if it's same sex. We don't care.
wonderful.
We don't care about any of that. We don't care.
Because it's nobody's business.
It's nobody's business. If you want to be a family and you have a great story, and a lot of times cancer is a big one, where they have to do IVF because one of the partners had cancer and they can't conceive naturally. We had one. We just did a young girl recently. It was just retrieving her eggs because she had, I guess it was ovarian cancer.
you
and she was young.
Cover fertility too.
It's fertility. It's any kind of fertility. It's fertility across the board. So whatever you need, we will grant you. And it's been amazing. I didn't look before, but we're over 100 babies now.
When was
our
it
Baby
founded?
Quest. Oh gosh, I became a board member when my girls were in 6th grade, and they're graduating college. So. And it was before that.
Okay. But you've been involved ever since.
I've been involved ever since, and it's an amazing organization.
Baby Quest.
Yeah, Baby Quest, Baby Quest.
We'll type it in the comment.
Baby Quest, and it's been fantastic. I mean, we've made so many babies, and the founder, Pamela, her daughters had issues, and she was like, "This is crazy. We can." And she put her money where her mouth is, and this has become her mission. And she's really, since my girls were in 6th grade, it was so small, and now it's grown, and they have offices in New York and LA, and babies are born all over the place now, and it's pretty great.
So
and it's
there are options, because as you know,
Yes.
there is still that big non-access to things that cost a lot in order to have a baby. So, but Baby Quest exists.
Baby Quest
and so
exists.
we will absolutely put the information, look them up, reach out to them. You never know if you don't try.
Exactly.
So you've gotta try.
BabyQuest.org.
So, okay, in closing, and I appreciate you just sharing this beautiful story, and I know it's going to inspire a lot of people. What would you advise someone right now, just today? Maybe, your 30 to 40-year-old, or maybe late 20-year-old, thinking about doing it, thinking about fertility, surrogacy, what are maybe one or two takeaways for them to bear in mind?
Okay, you definitely want to be a parent.
Yeah.
My husband actually wrote a book called "What He Can Expect when She's Not Expecting," because
So clever.
the fertility journey it's a two-man operation. As a wife, you're going through, horrible hormones, like you're getting shot up with all sorts of terrible things. But it's rough on the guys also because my husband always says, he wanted to have children. I needed to have children. And to see someone that you love inject themselves with hormones and all these things and breaking out and gaining weight and being sick, and then the failure after failure, and every period is a death.
Yeah.
Every period is a funeral. And that was horrific for him to go through. But guys also, they say really foolish things. They don't think. Now you're jacked up on hormones. So this book, this will save your marriage.
Oh my gosh.
It's a tongue-in-cheek book, but it tells you like top 10 things not to say to your wife when she's on fertility drugs. Like, you never want to start a conversation. My mother said.
No.
Yeah, there's a lot of really
Even when not pregnant.
Yeah. There's a lot of things in here that will save you
In life.
in life in general. And it just tells you. And the doctor I was saying earlier, this is the doctor who created my girls.
Yeah.
Helped create my girls. Was the co-founder and co-writer in this, and he ended up having a very successful practice. I'm not allowed to say all the people, but
of course.
But he had a very successful practice and is kind of the king of gestational surrogacy and things like that.
Well, Samantha,
but this is the book.
And we're going to put this information up. Where can people find this book?
Amazon.
Okay,
Amazon
so we'll
still.
put a link. We will please, this is what we talk about. You have to educate yourself. You have to get yourself the information. This is so perfect. Samantha, thank you, my friend. Really, you have been just so supportive and inspirational.
I'll leave the book with you.
With our personal journey with surrogacy, and I really trusted a lot of stuff you said, and it helped get us through our journey. And our boys are here now, and it still guides me very much, seeing how you have had such a beautiful, successful, loving journey, and you've normalized it, and we're progressive in a time that was just not supportive of it. So again, I commend you. Thank you for being here, and I'd love to have you back.
Thank you for having
talk
me.
all the other things.
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Beautiful. Thank you, friend.
Thanks. Thank you.